about. I am moving away slightly, just pivoting a little bit from the altar boy situation. I think I'm going to get a crowdfunding because there have been people who have shown that they have confidence in me to take the money and put it towards the purchases that I've said, and that's great. I'm probably going to do a Kickstarter. That way I guarantee what I'm promising happens, and it's bound by something reputable. And so that'll probably happen in the future. But here we are. Today we're talking about confessions, confession times specifically. And so making sure I got the mic. Yeah, everything's going. All right. So, why are Catholic confession times like this? So we're going to be talking about, my mic's being a little weird. We're going to be talking about what's going on with confession and how to kind of deal with this situation, right? So what situation am I talking about? Well, this one. Confessions at a single parish be like. Confessions Saturday, 3 p.m. to 30 p.m. Saturday Vigil Mass. Sunday Mass, 7:30, 9:30. The line for confession. Man, I wish that, I hope that's the line. And then the first 3 people in line and then everyone else. So, I do that on purpose. It is a meme, but it's there to reflect something that I think a lot of people experience, which is there's the 3 p.m. or by appointment time situation in their area. The priest is there, and unfortunately, the parent with 2 kids, 3 kids can't get to the confessional in time and beat the grandmas or grandpas. And the reason why this is important is because Saturdays at 3 are a very conflicting time. And it's not good for people who have, let's just say, a busy schedule. And part of that can't be helped, right? Like, you do have to prioritize God. You do have to say, I am going to confess. I'm going to make an effort to go and confess my sins. And so there's usually not going to be a great time. However, that being said, the problem with having just one confessional, the reason why this becomes such a problem is because that is the only time confession happens. And so the grandmas who, assuming they don't have work or they don't have a job like parents do, they could confess their sins maybe at a different time, maybe, on a before an 8:30 mass on a Wednesday or Friday or something. But if the parish only has the confession at 3, the grandmas go in, right? Like and grandpas, it's really just people who are older. They go in and they do a confession. Now, it's not always one person who's older. Sometimes it's younger people who will do that, but more often than not, it's older people. And there's a variety of reasons for that that I'm not necessarily going to list right now. But it is an issue where, all right, so this grandma could be coming in on a Wednesday, but there's no confession during the rest of the week. So they only come at 3 p.m. on Saturday. And thus filling up this time with a whole bunch of people who have time elsewhere they can go, but the parish only, the one priest, right? Like, because it's the single priest parish situates that way. And just as we've talked about the priest crisis in the past, that's a real issue. So like this is if you had 2 or 3 priests taking 1 hour a week, all right, so now you have 2 or 3 priests, now you have 2 or 3 hours, right? That's way better than the single hour that priests end up, a single priest typically gives at such parishes. And what's in my thumbnail are from actual parishes. So I don't want to give the impression I just cherry picked these. I mean, to a certain extent I did, because I was looking for 3 p.m. But here's the thing. they're in the same general area. Like they're in the same or neighboring cities, and they're within 10 to 15 minutes. Like you can chain them, right? And so like the fact that you have so many times within an area that is exactly the same time every week, like creates an incredible burden for people who are looking at for different times, because that's just when they're available. And so and the by appointment thing, let's see. The by appointment thing is really good for someone who's very comfortable with their priest. Like, I have no problem talking to Father Eric and being my pastor and being like, hey, is there some time I can come to do confession? I'm very easy with him doing that. But I don't do it often because he offers confession so much. So like I don't actually have that problem. But I understand, like I am very like Mike, I am incredibly comfortable with my priest to ask him that. However, if you're doing a bunch of people who are essentially cold calling priests for a confession, maybe a priest they've never met before, maybe they're coming back after years, everybody having it at the same time poses a problem. And so it doesn't allow for variability of people and their situations and their life circumstances. Now, again, don't get me wrong. If you are truly coming to God, like there is a certain barrier that they need to go. But I also think it's a ridiculous argument, especially in the Archdiocese of Detroit, where we have family of parishes, where a family of parishes have basically the same confession schedule, or within a 10-minute drive within Metro Detroit, that you all have the same or very similar confession times. Like that doesn't make any sense. And I think that does not prioritize the laity when it comes to confession in a way that I think is effective. And I'm not speaking from just my own experience. Like this is an experience that's all over the place. There's no studies on this, right? Like you can't just do a study. The closest thing you can do is just look at the distribution of times. And the cool thing about the Archdiocese of Detroit is the bishop has made it an issue, right? Like a good issue to let us be able to find confession times, and we can search them up. And so, it may be unfortunate that you're in an area that has incredibly limited confession times, I should say. But that doesn't necessarily mean that from the bishop's standpoint, like he doesn't know about it, or he doesn't care, or whatever. We have a website called confessionsfinder.org, where in the AOD you can look up confessions in your area. And so that is incredibly helpful if you did commit a mortal sin and you're like, man, I need to go and get confession. And it is incredibly helpful. And so I'm not trying to make this like just a super rant. Like that's not what I'm trying to do. Okay. Like I'm trying to be as, I know there are people in the Archdiocese of Detroit. The problem is that they may not know that such a thing exists, such as Confessions Finder. And so I'm in this area. I know people from my area will pay attention to what I'm saying. And sorry, I'm looking at the camera thinking you're looking at me, but you're actually looking at the meme. And that just, whoops. All right. So, so let me just look at the comments in chat. Seems to be getting pretty wild. Yeah, so everyone taking, like, a lot of people do take like 20 plus minutes per confession, and that is a huge issue. Like there is one, like, if you want to make the argument, like I think if you're watching this, okay, say you're coming back to the faith, those priests who want an appointment for confession outside of the time that they are more than willing to have that conversation, like to set up that time. Like call them, set up that time, get them done. They will talk to you. And the reason why I'm saying this is because if you're going to be at confession for like 20, 30 minutes, say you're doing a general confession, you haven't come back to the church in quite a while, try to set up a time with the priest at your closest parish and really like just give yourself time to confess those sins. And so that is incredibly helpful on a number of levels, but it allows you to not feel pushed, right? Like when you have a line of people behind you, there is urgency there, right? Like you and you know, we're talking about that urgency, and it's really important that, you know, there is a bit of urgency because it's a recognition that you're not the only one that has the priest's ear for that hour, right? But like if you are coming back to the faith, set up that appointment time. Those priests are willing to do it and they're more than welcome to do it. I mean, that's why they're saying set up an appointment. And um, if all you can do is make it during that hour, obviously go. But um, you know, like I said, there's gonna probably be a line. And so it'll add just naturally that urgency. Um, So let's see. Easier to have shorter confessions when you can go more often, which is easier when there's varied times. Right. So this one, easier to have shorter confessions when you can go more often, which is easier when there's varied time available. And you know, as someone who has like 5 kids, which only 2 of them can go to confession, and we can only technically bring in, I think, one. I don't know if my second youngest child can come in, but the baby can come in, right, to the confessional. Uh, but it makes it a problem for parents if it's not as available. And so like that's also a problem. Like if the parish doesn't do that. And again, you could say, all right, well, that's when you could set up an appointment. Yeah, like the problem with that is like you're quite literally trying to set up an appointment for every family that has kids. And that's not you're I mean, I guess you could do that, but I don't see how that saves time in an already incredibly packed schedule. Because, like I said, this is a priest crisis situation. It's part of the symptoms of a priest crisis. You got to always keep that in perspective. Like, we do not have as many priests as we need for the people that need to hear confessions, that need mass, that need everything, because we don't. And I've gone over the numbers in other videos. So if you don't believe me, I mean, look at those other videos. If you don't believe me still, I mean, I don't know what you're basing the crisis off of then. So all right, this wouldn't be so bad if you haven't been in confession in a long time, but everyone, right? So here's a thing, K37. This wouldn't be a bad thing if you haven't been to confession in a long time, but everyone, like, I really do think that like there are a lot of people who have not gone to confession. And the reason why I say that is because the time schedule is so bad. It's 3 p.m. on a Saturday, 4 on a Saturday, maybe 8:30 on a Saturday, 8:30 on a Sunday, but like you're only getting one of those times. Like the numbers don't match, right? Like when you see all the people receiving communion, and then you see the confession lines, which, I mean, if you're going there frequently, you should be able to see. All right, you're not like keeping track of every single person doing that. Do not do that. That is very bad. That is very unethical. That is wrong. Don't do that. But when you go there, you kind of get a feel for how many people are there, right? And it isn't something that uh, it doesn't take a lot of like behind the napkin math to do this in your head and be like, well, if we do this 4 times a month and there's 20 people and there's like 400 people that come to mass on Sunday, okay, how is this working? Because a lot of people, like, I think it's safe to say, based off a lot of experts, and when I say experts, I specifically mean theologians like Scott Hahn, Jen Horn, um, uh, uh, Tim Staples, Jimmy Akin. There has, like, okay, I don't know about Jimmy Akin. I don't know if he's ever put a number to this, but there's been recommendations on how often I've heard over like the decades I've listened to Catholic Answers, where it's about a month, right? Like you'd want to go for about a month. And so, like, ideally from that perspective, you're trying to go 12 times a year because every month you're probably committing a mortal sin. And so I'm saying probably, which means I could be wrong in the sense that the probability, if it's more than likely, the less likely aspect will happen. So I'm not giving this I'm not judging anyone. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. Like this is a very important thing here. Because people seem to understanding trends, understanding like what typically happens, and then saying you individually are judging that other individual. That's not what I'm doing. Okay. What I'm doing is I'm saying and this is something that the math actually matters for priests, right? Because they have a congregation that they have to attend to. They have spiritual daughters and sons that they have to parent through the sacrament. And so if they know like 400 people come and only like 100 people over the month come to confession, or over 2 months only about 200 people go to confession, and I'm not saying he tallies up everything, right? Like, but like generally speaking, he can get a good estimate based off just the single hour he's there. And if not enough people are coming to reflect those that are going to mass and receiving communion, like obviously he should say something, in the homily about coming to confession, but it's just like the rates don't match up when you only have one priest and like you only have 1 hour. And it's because a priest cannot go through that many people. Like that's part of the problem with the priest crisis is just quite frankly like 1 to 800 people, and the 800 is people who occasionally come during a month. And the reason why you include those people is because you'll incorporate people who are like nurses, doctors, people who work on Sundays, right? And so they can't come every week, but they come at least once a month. And those people matter too in that calculation. It would be ridiculous just to hold to the standard of every week. Okay. So, but when you have like 1 to 800, and that's the base level, there are some parishes that it's like 1 to 2,000. Okay. So like when you start looking at the variance of all these different parishes, like the numbers fluctuate wildly. And so, like obviously we really need priests, but even though, and I know this kind of goes a little bit against the point of this, there has to be some absolute sympathy for the priests, because I don't want to give the impression that this is just like they're doing bad. Okay. That's not what the point of this is. The point of this is to say, like, bringing to attention the fact that there's so many that converge on similar times that it just makes it harder for other people. Okay. I'm not saying this as the priests suck. The priests have a lot on their plate, and I want to make that incredibly clear. This is about helping priests. This is not about saying that they're doing bad things. Okay. So, sorry, going back to the confessions or comments. Sorry. So, okay. So also, yeah, like, there's another thing. There's a priest, I'm sorry, there's also Eastern rites. So a lot of people will look up confessions for Latin rite. Like for the Archdiocese of Detroit, I believe it's just Latin rite. But there are confessions done through Eastern rites. And so for us, we have a Maronite, Ukrainian, Byzantine, Chaldean. Chaldean's huge over here. And one of my best friends is Chaldean. He's recommended that, given I live so close to a Chaldean parish, that, hey, like check out that Chaldean parish occasionally in case you need that confession time. So just to emphasize the point about the distribution of what's going on, because I do think that's really important. Oh, okay. So it does include the Eastern rites. Okay. So, all right. So that's my wife helping me. Let's go in here. That meme's so funny. All right. So Archdiocese of Detroit, you can see this in the corner. When we look at the Archdiocese of Detroit, I looked up in the corner Dearborn. So I'm sure you've heard about Dearborn. It's that city that is known for things. Yeah, so we're in Dearborn. There are parishes in Dearborn, and we're going to look at them. It's starting on a Saturday. So Saturday, 8:30 a.m., one parish. 8:45 a.m., one parish. 3 p.m., 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parishes. 3:30, 1, 2, 3. And then 6:15, and then 6:30. And then Sunday, 1, 1, 1, 1. St. Gabriel Parish. Okay, so this is very interesting. It says all day, but it says after 7 p.m. Mass. It's a little confusing. So there's some things where it's, you have like First Friday Eucharistic adoration. So like there are some limitations on some of these confession times. And the problem though is when it comes to, so like we're only looking at one area, and over the course of a week we have 36 confession times within 36 confessions amongst several different times, but lots of them are between 3 and 3:30 at this one, but not as many as others, and I'll show you what I mean by that. But you can see that there is somewhat of a distribution here that is helpful. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to be like whenever you want it. Like we just don't live in an area where I think that's reasonable to assume. But there does seem to be a distribution in Dearborn. It's pretty spread out. So like when you look at Fraser, why are we attached to Fraser? Like we're in East Point. So you have whatever. All right. So we're apparently part of Fraser. That's us at the top at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. And then 3, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You also see us again because we have a 4 p.m. Mass, although that goes from 3 to whatever. I'm not trying to answer for my parish. The point is that a lot of the numbers, a lot of these parishes that are here are not throughout. Okay, like St. Basil, you keep seeing. St. Martin de Porres, you keep seeing. And a few others. St. Basil just owns the bottom 3. But like there's 31 times, but I've already counted like 6 that are St. Basil's. With the and that's good for us, right? Like that's good for St. Basil's. And this is, by the way, not to say the other parishes suck. Okay, like working with the family of parishes is really important, but it does reflect a problem when so many of them are just on at 3 p.m. or at 3:30. Like that's a lot. And so it creates, like I said, a problem, a bottleneck issue, but also it creates a bottleneck issue, but it also creates an issue of, like for parents, when things happen on Saturday, like I said, what's more important, God or the event? Absolutely God. But there are circumstances which make it really hard, right? Like when you're doing an away game for like one of your kids, you go to that away game, but you can't make it back in time for the parish. So it's like, or for oh my gosh, reconciliation, obviously like you should drop the event. But then what you do, okay, so here's the mentality of that. What you do is you create this like mindset of like, well, I would like my kid to do something good, which is play games and build camaraderie in a sport, but my parish only has this one time that we can go to. And so obviously we have to sacrifice that sport so that we can play. However, like realistically, is there any other time that the priest can prioritize confessions? Like that's a real, our survey is passed out, right? Like to ask, hey, what's a great time for confessions to happen during the week? I know several people who would love it if we had parishes that had a like that did it between like 5 and 6:30, right? Like they start at 5, 5:30, and 6. There are some parishes that actually do that around here, but it's like their only time for confession. And so it's like really weird because some of them have like two priests, and it's like, okay, well, why are you doing it? Anyways, but like the point here is that we don't have what seems to be a way of like, let me backtrack. The priests don't seem to talk to each other. Like these cities that I'm showing you sprawl out. Like they're not all centered within a mile of each other. Some of them are, like the ones that I showed at the beginning, like in my thumbnail, they're within a few miles of each other. But like these here, like like for example, I'll just take St. Blaise and St. Basil are pretty far away from each other. They're about 20 minutes drive away from each other. Same thing with St. Ephrem. And so like this idea that like we'd have to go like all the way over there. Now, granted, you may say like 20 minutes isn't hard and isn't that much to ask. It also depends on the day, right? But so again, I'm not trying to say like there needs to be a whole bunch of variability. It's just really when it comes down to it, one time a week seems to be a problem. And if that one time a week is the same as other parishes that have it one time a week, that becomes a problem. So again, I'm not trying to make this a rant. I'm trying to show you that the issue is if you're going to pick one time, try to make it variable. Like I'm obviously talking to priests, but it's like, please, look at the surrounding parishes, talk to them, and make it as easy for us laity to get to. Because all of you doing it at 3 p.m. does create a problem. Like I said, it creates a bottleneck issue. And so, like when you look at other, like, you have 51 confession times here. This is for Sterling Heights. It does have some of the same parishes because there seems to be a, what do you call it? Within a certain amount of time or distance. So it includes some of those parishes like St. Ephrem. It's the same St. Ephrem as prior. So, and then here, 60 parishes for, let's see, what is this, Troy? Yep, Troy. Sorry, the camera is like right over where I need to actually see it. But like I said, like you just see a whole bunch of 3 and 3:30s and then a bunch of one-offs. So again, it's good that we see a lot of those one-offs, but these parishes are not like they're pretty far out. I mean, these two aren't, but I'm not trying to call out single parishes. Like that's not what I'm talking about, or that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is show you the distribution. So I think I've done that. See, this one focuses on 3:30 and then it kind of dwindles. And you only see basically, that's the other thing. For a lot of these, for the ones that you see one-offs, you see there seems to be within that area one parish that has a bunch of extra times. And so for that one that we showed, it was St. Basil. For this one, it seems to be Our Lady of Good Counsel Parish. And then like, again, so I'm not gonna keep doing that. Just because I don't want to give the impression that I'm singling any of them out in an unjust way. This is again something where it's like, us laity would, especially us parents, would like more variability. Like I said, there's parishes around me, like within my immediate vicinity, that will do like 5:30 and 6 on a Tuesday, but unfortunately they're both on a Tuesday. If one was on like a Wednesday or a Thursday and the other one was on a Tuesday, Like that would be incredibly helpful for this area. Now, obviously there's the needs of the immediate parish that matter as well, but that's also why I think a survey is good in this case, because let me just get rid of King Theoden there for a second. I think having a I mean, obviously I'm a statistician, but like you get an immediate answer from the very population you want to serve. And so it's like, hey, would it be better if confession was at like 8:30 in the morning on Saturday? Would it be better if it was at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, or on a Friday at 5 p.m. or whatever? Like have those options be available and just see how many people check those boxes. Like you don't want to do it one-off either. So like in this case, this is not a thing that you want to do like a one-off. You would want to do like top 2 or 3, right? Because people are going to have varying times. And so you'll have overlap, and you want to see the most overlap. And so that would help you. So obviously talking to priests or whoever does the administration aspect of this for the parish, that would help you discern in a better way when you expand it beyond just having a single choice. Because in this case, you want to know basically as much variability as possible for you to make your decision, because you have limited time, right? Like, and so like there is that, understanding. Like I'm not just trying to throw the whole like couch at you or something. Like it's very much from a standpoint of like, I understand your position, and I'm not trying to belittle it at all. It's just a matter of like getting things to work out that not everybody has it at 3. And that's it. Let's see what's so here's the mentality that a lot of people, or at least, so this is an assumption on my part, but if they're only going to have one specific time, confession time a week, at least please have also 30 to 15 minutes before each mass if possible. Right. So like that's what Father Eric does. He has designated times where he makes it available to everybody. And then he also does it a half hour before mass. And so we are pretty confident that if we need to go to confession, we have the availability to do so. Now, if let's see, the problem with that again is like, so it's the mentality of the congregation. If the mentality of the congregation, okay, so like it's at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, well, again, they should prioritize going on that Saturday. But if confession is not prioritized within the parish, there becomes like a lackluster understanding. I mean, like part of the problem that we exist today is a very lukewarm Catholicism. And I mean, you hear it from people who are, rad trads, like that's like a huge thing that they talk about, is just the lukewarmness of people. And there's truth to that. Like we see that reflected in mass attendance. Like it's so small, like it's a problem. But like when you emphasize confession, you're also emphasizing the Eucharist, right? Like because the understanding of the Eucharist tied to confession is very pivotal. Like when I taught my kids confession, or the Eucharist, like for their first communion, I was very emphatic about making sure that they understood the tie to confession, because you can't receive communion if you have a mortal sin, right? Like that's a huge problem. And at the heart of this, that's the thing that we're trying to heal, right? Like that's what we need the priests to heal us with, right? Like absolution. And it's, I think it's really easy to just point out and say like, oh, well, like mass time should be different. It's another thing to actually offer a solution. And so like, that's what I'm trying to offer here. a solution. So do a survey, talk to people who are not just on the parish council, talk to people who are not just within a particular age range above 50, like talk to parents, talk to people who, and parents that have varying ages of kids. Like if you really want to, and a lot of this seems self-explanatory, right? Like, well, what are you telling me about being personable with my parish? I understand that. Okay. Like I'm just kind of giving a whole comprehensive suggestion. I do think that the survey is the number one way to get there, because if people care about confession, say you have 100 people at the congregation, okay, if people care about confession, they'll fill that out. If they don't fill that out, that also gives you another understanding and another data point within your congregation, within your family, to understand, okay, well, why didn't they fill it out? There's 100 people there. Okay. And let's just say there would be 60, there should be 60 that come in. And the reason why you have 60 that come in is because of families, right? Like you have 100 people there, you have a bunch of kids, you have husbands and wives. Okay. So you should be expecting around 60 surveys to come in if everybody who should be answering answers them, right? But then you notice only 20 come in. Okay. That's a real problem, because now at this time you're like, okay, well, I need to know when confession is good. Why aren't they all answering this? And it may be an indication that they don't think confession is that important, or they may have the wrong idea that, because of bad catechesis, that the Confiteor or the group confession at the beginning of Mass is enough for mortal sins. Obviously not something you want. But what I'm saying is, like, when you apply something as simple as just doing a survey, a lot of data points can come from that, even if it's just asking one question, because you're interpreting how they respond, you're interpreting what they respond with, and then you as the pastor are then able to make appropriate reactions, or react accordingly. And so yeah, the whole thing about like talking to more than one people, like you should do that anyway. But if you're, I mean, it's more of just a holistic explanation, and that's just what I do. Like I'll tell people at work like a whole bunch of things that they already know, but it's to give a holistic understanding. So there was no offense by that. I was not trying to be offensive in any way. But it is really important to, if you can, just print out 100 sheets, ask them at each Mass. So you can literally make an anonymous survey in Google in like 5 minutes. Like, right, like you can do that. Like you don't even have to have a name attached to it. Like you just ask everybody and they write it down. And you can even, like, this could be something that you say during the homily, right? Like during the homily, do this. And it would help me a great deal, right? Like, because that's the whole thing. It would help you a great deal to then help them. Like that's the whole avenue here. And with parents, especially like with little kids, there is this distraction that happens. And a lot of cases, like I don't want to say a lot of cases, but there can be tendencies where people have confession last minute. They're like, oh crap, I got to go to confession. And I forgot about it the last 3 days. And, XYZ happens. And so they're like frantically trying to find a place to go to confession, because they got distracted with life. And again, not saying that they're not putting God first. It's just, it's a proximity issue. And so, but yeah, so I guess that's it. I'm trying to help the priests, but at the same time, I'm pointing out like very real problems that we have. There have been K37. There have been, some comments in the chat. If you guys have any more comments that I missed, I tried not to ramble, and so if I rambled, I apologize. But if you have any comments in the chat, like I'll give you a minute to like post them, because like again, I'm not trying to This isn't about beating up on priests. This is about helping priests understand. And when you're between a rock and a hard place, which I know priests are, um, having some feedback would be helpful, right? Like, because sometimes you're not able to get it. Let's see. So this is about the Googling, the making the anonymous survey, and then, or you can try to go and get stuck at the end of the long line. Okay, got it. That's something else. So okay, it doesn't look like there's any more. I mean, I guess more people are joining. So I guess if any more questions in regards to, you know, what you would like priests to know about or to ask questions. Like, I'm kind of treating this as like an open forum, completely unsolicited. No priest knows I'm doing this, but it's just this idea of trying to put this information out there, because the thumbnail shows a very real problem that most of us experience. And then this little meme, let me try to get it. This little meme shows another real problem that a lot of us experience. So again, that's not to say people shouldn't be going to confession, but definitely, like, if we're having situations where, like, telling your priest that, well, it's not just telling your priest, but like priests, like, I'm always curious from the standpoint of priests, if they have situations where someone comes in and it takes 20 to 30 minutes for a confession to happen, and then you notice, like, you see 3 or 4 more people that hour, and then you get out of that line and you see a line of people waiting for you. I wonder if those priests come out and say, hey, like, when you go to confession, like, try to make it concise, and there's that hour, there's people there, and then for, if you want to set up an individual one to do a longer confession or something like that. Only because, like, that's something a lot of people have experienced. Like, that meme exists because so many people have experienced it. So yeah. Right. So the population shifts, like, and you'll see that with the priest. So I think that's it. I don't think I have more people getting on, which is kind of interesting that more people are, like, watching this as I'm saying this. But if there's not any more questions, I don't want to just make this like an hour-long video for nothing, or, like, unless, obviously, if someone wants to comment. The last thing I'll say, though, in regards to what's been going on, is it looks like I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter to ask for money to, for crowdfunding, to get information from CARA, specifically ordination data that goes back 30 years for all Latin Rite parishes. And so, like, that, like, and it costs a pretty penny. It's about $750. I do not have that money. So, and I'm not looking to do this just to say, oh, I've got this information, because me holding on to that information means literally nothing if I don't do something with it. So, because I'm not a bishop, I'm not a priest, looking at that data means nothing to me, practically speaking. The only practical aspect I have with that data is to use my talent as a statistician and present that data in a way that's going to be effective to bishops, so that I'm not, or I'm sorry, so that they can make, let's just say, I'm putting up gosh, there's the other thing. People actually are like, I've had comments where you're usurping the church's authority by giving your opinion on altar boys, and it's like, I'm not. Like, it's not a matter of doctrine. It's not a matter, or I'm sorry, altar girls. Like, it's not a matter of doctrine. It's not a matter of dogma. It's just, are we in a priest crisis or not? Like, and do we need more boys to become priests? The answer is yes. So, like, unequivocally, we need more priests. Like, we're having this discussion right now as like, because it's part of the symptoms of not having enough priests. And so, like, we need more priests. And so having a honest discussion about the situation with altar boys and altar girls in relation to the priesthood absolutely should happen. And it shouldn't just happen on like rad trad articles. Like, I'm not a radical traditionalist. I would say I'm a traditionalist, but like, I am not like, I go to a Novus Ordo, I go to a new mass. It's a very reverent new mass, but like, I also don't I don't just look at information through the lens of, let's just say, the rad trads. And I think, the problem is that mostly they're the only ones pointing this out. And that's not okay, because it's a real problem. Like, so going back to it, that's why I'm getting this Kickstarter. I'm going to put it up probably on Monday when I do the live stream. It's only going to last for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then if I don't hit the amount of money that I need to pull the data, I don't get it and I don't do it. And so, but the reason why I chose Kickstarter was because it guaranteed the ability that those that pledged don't lose their money. And so that's why I chose Kickstarter, is because a lot of the other ones, like, your money can't be returned if something happens. And I want to make sure that if something were to happen, if I were to, for example, die in the process of this, and that money was gained, that it would be able to come back to you and not just be stuck in limbo, not just be stuck in whatever. Like, it would be returned to you. And so I'm trying to make sure that this is the safest way, that when it comes to your money, that it's safe. And so that's because I take this very seriously. Like, I've had people say that they're confident in me doing that, and they'd be willing to support me. And that is awesome to hear. I appreciate that greatly. But at the end of the day, like, I want to make sure that if you're going to put your faith in me, or wrong choice of words, if you're going to if you're going to support me in that way to do this analysis, I want to make sure that you're safe donating, because there are other ones that I looked at, mostly the typical ones, and there's some issues with them. So I think that's it. Come on in here, confessions for the. So all right. So last thing I'll say, and this is from my Chaldean friend, because we talked earlier, and I told him I was going to do this. He had brought up. So yes, you did, and I appreciate you being here. Because, all right, yeah. But the what is it? The Chaldean friend, what they did, and they were one of the first people to actually do this, like one of the first priests to actually do this, is the drive-by confession at Chaldean parishes were what basically kick-started the COVID drive-by confessions. So because they were the first ones to do it. And so he was like, oh man, I really wish they could just like do it again, because it basically made it so that confession was the easiest possible thing you could do, where you could go to confession in your car and then have them do that. And there's like no like you have no excuse at that point not to go to confession. Now, I agree with him that you basically have no excuse to go to confession, but there is like kind of an issue with the fact that people will see that you're in confession, like with your car, and that poses a problem with the decorum and the disposition, at least in relation to how you're standing, how you're sitting, how the priest is sitting. And so like there's some like issues there that revolve around reverence of the act itself. Now that was an extreme situation, right? Like that was an extreme situation in COVID where the Chaldean priests were like, hey, we're going to do this because we can't do anything else in Michigan. Like our governor was not great when it came to the lockdown. But like when it came to the priests, like they were willing to think creatively and they came up with that. So I just wanted to bring that up because the Eastern rites in the Archdiocese of Detroit, obviously they're not within the Archdiocese of Detroit as in jurisdiction, but they are here amongst us. And I did say amongst, so just a little emphasis on that. That they have been a great example of creativity and piety within my experience living in the Archdiocese of Detroit. So I can't say enough good things about the Eastern rites. And if you ever visit the Archdiocese of Detroit, obviously go to St. Joseph's Shrine, go to a lot of other parishes, but while you're visiting, but also try to hit one of the several Eastern Rite parishes because we have a lot of Eastern rites. So, yeah. So like during COVID, it was necessary because the lockdown requirements were so stringent. It became a barrier for even getting into the church with a lot of people. And unfortunately, a lot of parishes basically shut down. So I thought the Chaldeans doing what they did in relation to all of that was, I think, an excellent idea. And it really dealt with like a pastoral need, like for those that were being terrorized, because that's what the news was doing with the information. They were terrorizing people. It was a way of giving comfort while providing the sacrament. You have your space, please come to the sacrament. Like that was basically how it was sold, and it was great. Like lines of cars, just like looking at those parishes, like lines of cars going outside of the what do you call it, outside of the parking lot. It was great. So yeah, I've again nothing but great things to say about our Eastern Rite brothers. So but I think I'm gonna get yeah, I saw your other comment. But yeah, I'm going to get going because again, I kind of feel I'm just kind of saying the same thing over and over again, and I don't really want to do that for the people who are going to be watching this later. So if you have any comments, leave them down below. And if you've been staying with me this long, please like it. Please like this. That would be very helpful. And leave a comment, even if it's like first or second or third or whatever. Make it fun if you want, but it's that would help with getting this out, because I'm noticing I get a lot of people from my subscribers, but I think there's just a lack of interaction. And so I'm doing a call to action for, hitting like and whatever. But yeah, because the looking at the analytics, like the times are good, the clicks are good, everything's good, but it's just not getting out there. And obviously this is something that I would like to get out there because it's dealing with something a lot of us deal with. And so I would really appreciate it if you could do that. And but besides that, I'm going to stop talking. I hope you enjoy your Labor Day weekend and have fun with your family. Thank you for being with me this time, and have a great day.